Jester. So I am the Secretary of the Delaware Artificial Intelligence Commission. I also, my day job is I'm a product manager at JPMorgan Chase. I work in the legal department designing solutions for what's called outside counsel engagement. So essentially, I'm building smart solutions for attorneys or people that work with attorneys to reduce the cost of legal work and things like that. So I am what is called an AI generalist, meaning that I look at AI for all applications, not just for legal applications. Today's topic is going to be on models, agents, and assistants. So this is the last workshop in our spring series for this year. We're going to be, I've actually had a really great discussion because of the positive reception for this. We're actually going to continue these workshops in the fall. In August, we're going to be doing a workshop specifically on AI for Microsoft Office. So I'm going to show you all the different add-ons like Copilot, Claude, and then the various Google add-ons show you what they do, what they don't do, and then you can make your own decisions about which ones you want to use. And then we've got a really special presentation coming up in September where we're going to be working with a local company called Launchbox 360. The topic is digital twins and augmented reality. We're going to actually show you how to create a 3D model of a space with your phone and how digital twins and things like photogrammetry and other more visual-based AI mediums are starting to become mainstream now. One of the cool things we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a 3D model of this library that you can actually walk through online. So that's going to be something cool that we actually show in there. I'm really, really looking forward to that session. So again, you can follow us on the library's website. All of these sessions are also recorded now as well. So you can find them on YouTube. Just go to the Delaware Libraries YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that. You'll get notifications for it. You can also subscribe to the playlist. We have a specific playlist just for AI workshops. So again, if you want to come back and review this, anybody that registers online or puts their email address in the chat on Zoom will receive a copy of the presentation. So again, we're going to be presenting a lot of examples today. AI agents, assistants is a big topic. We can't actually cover everything today. The goal here is to provide a foundation and show you kind of where agents should be used, and then where maybe you don't need an agent, you just need to understand the capabilities of certain LLMs and what they do. Again, the goal here is I'm trying to not encourage people to spend money, to be able to use the different processes, be able to use all of the different agents that I'm talking about, at least in a free mode. And then I'll show you various paid versions and you can make your determination. I'm not paid by any company to be here. I always like to open up by saying about the data center debate because it always comes up. I am neither for nor against data centers. I have 4 rules about data centers. I don't want to smell it. I don't want to taste it. I don't want to hear it. And I don't want to pay for it. You satisfy all 4 of those rules, you can put it in my backyard. But if you can't, then you need to think a little bit harder about how much innovation you're doing and whether you're trying to build tomorrow's solution with yesterday's brain. So you should really be thinking about how you can do this effectively because you can build data centers that don't become a burden to the community as well. So that's all I'm going to say on that topic, but I just like to get that out of the way so that people know I'm here specifically for education. Now, for those of you in the room, if you have any questions about what I'm talking about, if something doesn't make sense, raise your hand and stop me. Again, the goal here is for me also to learn what you know about AI as well. So when we're making recommendations to the state about, what we need to do for curriculum, how we need to provide grants for nonprofits, things like that, what we learn in these workshops and through this engagement is going to all play into that. So in addition to sitting on the the Delaware AI Commission, I also am one of the vice chairs of the training subcommittee, which is specifically focused on public knowledge, educational knowledge, K-12 all the way through university, and then also having separate AI guidance for state and government workers as well. So, but let's talk about some fun stuff today. So here today, my goal is you should be able to explain to any person what the difference is between an AI model, an AI agent, and an AI assistant by the end of today's meeting. Okay. These are 3 words that get thrown around a lot, like they mean the same thing, but there's subtle differences to them, and I'm hopefully going to be able to articulate that today. So we're going to talk about first models. So when we talk about AI models, when I say model, what comes to your mind? Anybody? Microsoft? Okay, well, America's Top Model, yeah, that definitely comes. But when someone says an AI model, what immediately comes to your mind?
I don't know, blueprint.
Blueprint?
Yeah.
AI model is essentially the brain. A good way to think about this is an AI model is an engine in a lot of ways. So when you hear about Google Gemini, and then you see underneath it, it says Google Gemini 3.5, that's a version. Each one of these models is basically a software package. So a model itself is basically an engine that's trained on a specific set of data. Now, you can look at all the different companies that exist: Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, Meta. Meta trained their model on social media data. X and formerly Twitter trained theirs on Twitter data. Microsoft Copilot trains theirs on all of your Microsoft documents. And Google has trained it on everything else on the internet. And Google's been indexing the internet for a long period of time. So you can look at, based on the companies that are putting out these models, you can kind of make inferences about which actual data they're using in their training sets. And the data that you use to train an AI model, in the same way that, a architect or an engineer tunes an engine to get a specific performance, that's the same thing with AI models. So just like there's, I like to look at it as a car as a very good metaphor for this, where the AI model is the actual engine itself underneath. What you interact with is the actual user interface. So in the case of like ChatGPT or Gemini, that's the chat box, the chat window. Now, what we're going to be talking about today can be accessed through that chat, but can also be accessed through developer tools and things like that. We're going to focus a little bit more on the developer tools in a later session because that's very, very tech heavy. So I'm trying to make this accessible. But again, when you're looking at a model, think about an engine. Imagine a car where you could push a button and go from a V4 to a V12 just by changing a configuration. That's what model actually is. So when you look at it,
Oh,
yes, that's a good way of putting it. The model and the code are the same thing. So, and and there's every model is different. So like, for example, like I said, there's the interface, there's the model, and then there's the version. So interface, ChatGPT, Claude.ai, Copilot, there's a desktop version of Claude too. The model itself is actually what's underneath. So if I go in and I'm looking at, and for example, if those of you who haven't seen this before, I'm going to switch to just mirroring for now, if that's okay. Okay, my tech guy's just saying yes, yes, Rich, you're not going to break it. Good job. Okay. Um, okay, so this is what the Claude desktop version looks like. This is accessible using the $20 a month, $20 per month Claude package. So when I go in here and I go to actually run a chat on something, you'll see down here is models. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about a model. A model is actually which code base or which engine you're putting it to. You can use the two words interchangeably. They're basically the same thing. You have Haiku 4.5. This is fastest for quick answers. Sonnet 4.6 is a general use model for all everyday tasks, and Opus 4.8 is complex task. Another way to look at this, so how many of you have been to a gas station and you've seen the different grades of gasoline? That's what you should look at this. 87 is on the bottom, 89 is in the middle, 92, 95 is on top, because that's how much energy or tokens it's going to consume to get you an answer. So you don't need a Mack truck to make a pizza delivery. But believe it or not, in AI, that's a lot of what people actually do. Some the big models that are usually being talked about online, that you type in one sentence and it magically creates an entire video game for you and things like that. A lot of that stuff is for people who have premium versions of stuff. And I've tried a lot of this clickbait, like go in, try the model, it will instantly generate. It doesn't. It fails miserably. So be careful about what AI can. Go ahead.
When we go in the interface like Claude, then we choose which model we want?
Yes, you choose which model you want. Now what will happen is, so you see like on here, you see Fable 5 at the top. That was recently in the news lately where the government said no one's allowed to use it. So then they disabled it for everybody. But I was using it last week up until the US government said no more. What it usually will default to the most efficient model for general use. So like that's why you see here it says Sonnet 4.6, it's defaulting to that model. Now they may, depending on which tier you're on, like if you're using just the free version, you might only have access to Haiku 4.5 or an earlier version of Sonnet like 4.5 or 4.4 because it's free. It works. They give the newest models to the people who pay the most money is typically how it works. Now, whether or not you think that money is worth the cost is completely dependent on what you do for a living and how you utilize AI. But it's important to understand this because if you're using a free version, if you use this 4.8, which I'm not going to do, it will burn through 2 to 3 times as much gas as doing it on a lower model. So you ever seen people online where they have that timeout saying, you've run out of tokens, you can't use it until X 3 a.m. or something like that? That's what I'm talking about. Behind the scenes, there's a limit in how much they let each one of these sessions actually consume in terms of tokens. And then that limit's set based on what your payment tier is. The reason I say this is because there's a reason why a lot of things that people say AI does don't work on the free version. They say, oh, you just need the paid version. Well, guess what? I bought the paid version for all the different ones. And you still can't do like recreate Dungeons and Dragons Baldur's Gate 3 in web page. You can try it, but it will, and I'll show you an example where it fails miserably at that. No, not really. And again, that's one of the reasons why, we have the Delaware Artificial Intelligence Commission, because one of the things like I've advocated for is for the Department of Technology Infrastructure to build an interface similar to like Claude, but we own the interface. And then all we have to do is contract with Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, each one of the models. And then we can make it available through all our K through 12 teachers too and students. So it's all under one umbrella. Go ahead.
What about DuckDuckGo? They have a similar interface. It's free, there's no registration, and they don't give the data to the company, so they're not training off of it. It goes up to maybe
I haven't used it. I'm
GPT-5.
familiar with it, but I haven't used it recently. I used it back when I still had an Android.
Yeah, it only goes so high with models, but
And again, you can do a lot.
free.
And again, what a lot of people do, if you don't want to pay for it, you use up one, then you go to the next page, go on Gemini, pick up where you started and go from there until you run out of tokens on that and go through. That's what I did until I decided which ones I pay for. Right now, I only pay for Claude, but that could change tomorrow. If all of a sudden they push a change to this and I can't do the things that I'm used to doing, then I might switch back and go to Gemini. I was on Gemini when we started these workshops back in January. I was Mr. Gemini. Gemini is the coolest thing on the planet. Now Claude is. The reason it is because each one of these models gets trained on different data. Each one of these models has different shareholders and stockholders. Each one of these models has different relationships with the federal government. That controls what the output actually is. Now, the reason I'm spending so much time talking about models is because when you're going to build agents, it's going to default to the highest grade gasoline. So when you're trying to figure out whether you want to build an agent or an assistant, or you just want to have a prompt that you save, some might be cheaper than the other. And a lot of companies will sell you on building these end-to-end products for you. And it's just ChatGPT in a box or Gemini in a box and things like that. They're not actually selling you something that you couldn't do yourself. And they might be selling you an over-engineered version of what you actually need. Like, I'll give you an example, okay? One of the things that's built into almost all of these models, does anybody know what a VCF file is? Okay, a VCF stands for virtual contact file. So when you have your contacts in your iPhone or in your Android, what actually gets saved in the back is called a VCF file. Now, I'm just going to go online and grab a random business, okay? I'm just going to say a pizza shop near where I am, Stone Mill Pizza, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this in and I want to save it to my phone. I want to create a contact. Now, you could do this with, let's say someone gives you a business card. You take a picture of the business card and you upload it. And you can go in here and you can say, now you'll notice I put like little stars in between things. That is what I use. That's what's called a separator. So you can separate your instructions that you want the thing to do from the context or the information you want it to understand. So in this case, I wanted to create a VCF file for this business. I'm going to use Sonnet 4.6 and I'm going to run it. Yep, it's just down here. It's going to default to, like I said, the most efficient one. Every one of these interfaces has a little mode at the bottom where you can change it. It'll be like a little slider or something like that. So this is something that I did this on purpose. It could do 2 weeks ago, and now it didn't even finish what I wanted it to do. So when I go to Gemini, and again, this is free version of Gemini. And you can tell I'm not paying for it because the nice little upgrade button in the corner. You'll also notice that so down here, this is a model. Remember how I told you they make the big expensive models, they say for the people that pay. So this one is using 3.5 flash. So it's using an even lightweight version. So this would be the equivalent of using like low grade gasoline plus 50% ethanol. Okay. And that's the model that it's actually burning now. Because you're also seeing that it took a little bit. It didn't do it instantly. Now in here, it has copy the exact text block inside the block below, how to save it. So it's telling you to do this, and then all you have to do is rename this as a VCF file, and then when you open it, it will open up as a... Now again, this is not really that helpful. Who wants to go through and do all that? Now, if I use a different Gemini model for this, like if I use one of the pro models for this, it will probably create it. It would probably create it for me and not go through backwards. So what it's doing is it's giving you a dumber answer or a more tedious answer so that you'll want to upgrade and use the faster model. Both of these things on Google Pro would automatically generate a VCF file. Now what it's done, because of this Flash version, it's limiting what its outputs are. The reason I say this is because one of the things that's realistic about AI agents is these models change all the time. So what that means is every single time it changes, your potential, whatever you want it to do, can fail. It can do something wrong. It can go sideways. There is just as much maintenance in maintaining AI agents as maintaining any other code base. And while it might be great for companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and all of that to say that they've replaced 50% of their engineers with this, yeah, but you're still going to need validators, testers, people going through doing this because the AI agents only learn what they're given and their inference is very, very limited. So you don't know whether an answer is correct unless you like it or dislike it. That's the only way the AI knows it did a good job or a bad job. Otherwise, it just goes from how many times a particular person asked a similar question, and then it tries to give you the most predictable response for it. So again, the reason I say this is because what it did today, it might not do tomorrow. What's free today might not be free tomorrow. And then the exact reverse. You go down the line and you might have free models from this. We talk about, there's DeepSeek, which is one of the Chinese models, things like that. And there's other open source models that you can get too. They do really basic stuff. Like if you wanted to, write an email to your boss saying you're calling out sick, or create a receipt really quickly for an invoice that you need. You don't need an agent for those things. You just need an LLM, and you might just need a decent LLM model. So that's why I wanted to start off talking about what the difference with model is before we get into agents, because the model you use will dictate whether you need an agent or not. Like I'll give you an example. Okay, so again, we talked about large versus small models. So big models would be like ChatGPT 4.0, Gemini 2.0, Claude 4, and that other ones would be, smaller models. So one of the things that I like about Claude can run in my desktop with no internet access. It's small enough that it can run locally on my machine. The same thing with PowerPoint and some of the add-ins that it does too. So these big models where they say they need giant hyperscale data centers for things, yeah, maybe for advanced research, but the average user doesn't need that. And if we have even a 25% decrease in how much energy is used or how much water is needed for this, no one's going to want a hyperscale data center. Everyone's going to want their own in their backyard so that they have it in control on premises. They know what happens with it, and it can be a self-monitored system. It's one of the reasons why China is actually dropping data centers at the bottom of the ocean in pressurized capsules. Because when you don't have human beings, you don't have as much dust, you don't need oxygen and airflow and things like that. And then the heat just dissipates in the water. And it doesn't actually require water to cool it because it's surrounded by water. Again, I'm saying this because it's important to right size what you're trying to do because it's directly going to impact how much you can get done. I have tried to do things on Claude where I have blown through my entire day's worth of tokens in one prompt because I asked it to do something very, very complicated and it got through about 3/4 of it, hit my limit and stopped. So the reason I say that is when you try to build an agent for yourself, it's good to experiment with what these models actually do first before you try to jump in and build a model workflow. Now, again, to reiterate, model is the engine. Okay, so to give you an example, here are a couple examples that you can try on different models. So first one is to compare models for a use case. I summarize 50-page legal contracts daily, compare GPT, Claude Sonnet, Gemini Pro on accuracy cost per 1,000 tokens and context window. Recommend the best fit. That's a very wordy technical sentence. It absolutely is, but it's going to tell you how much gas you need to do basic stuff on each model. And if you run this in different models, you may get different answers for each one of the different vendors, even though this should be publicly available information, even though this should be testable. But you can start to vet these things and you can use these models to compare and contrast with each other. I am not above simply asking a model, can you do this? Can you do that? And it will tell you, yes, I can, no, I can't. Originally, what it would do is it would automatically recommend that you upgrade. Now, because of certain legislation in some states, it doesn't automatically do that. It just won't do things, or it'll do it in a more complicated way. So, that's an example of this. Another way is you can estimate the token use, 200 staff, each send 10 prompts a day, averaging 500 tokens. And again, this is very, very low because a lot of things are over 1,000 tokens now. Estimate the monthly API costs, things like that. You've heard all of these people that now that they've used AI, they've blown through their entire IT budget in the first 6 months of the year, and now they're looking to hire everybody back because they can't have that sustainable cost. This is where, again, go ahead.
Can you ask it how many tokens it'll take up front?
Yes,
Again,
but you'll need to spend a few tokens to figure out that. It's just like anything. You're going to spend calories if you wanted to analyze something before you did it. It's the same thing. But it might cost you 20 versus 20,000. So, and especially if you can write a really long detailed prompt. Let's say you want it to use Claude Cowork to build a website or something like that. And I can show you guys how that works. You might create this really long thing, but you've done a lot of stuff in the app today and you think you're going to hit your limit very shortly. You can just say run or evaluate, but don't execute the following prompt and tell me how many tokens it would take on each one of Anthropic's models. And then it will literally tell you that. It'll be a guess, but it'll be reasonably close. Because a lot of these models have been trained where they've had to do performance testing and things like that. So that data is embedded, available, or inferable based on everybody else that's using these models at the same time. Sorry?
Tokens, can you?
Yeah. So for example, I'll go back to Claude, for example. All right. Somebody give me a family-friendly musical artist.
Taylor Swift.
Always Taylor Swift. Okay. Now you see how it's calling a skill here? What it's doing is it's going to go through and it's calculating it as it's going through. Now, on some of the other models, like for example, the one that I use at JP Morgan, they want us to track token usage. So every single prompt, every single thing you enter at the end has a little thing you can look up. With these models now, you have to kind of ask them for it. Some show it by default. It really depends on what user interface or which PC you're doing. You can go down to, let me double check and make sure it's not something that's in settings again. So you can see here is our usage limit. So this is my current session. Basically, they have it where we do limits in like 4-hour spaces. So you can use up so much within a 4-hour period of time. And again, I've done nothing today, but just fix some formatting in a PowerPoint deck and ask it 2 or 3 questions. And it's paid version. So keep in mind, and it's blowing through probably a big chunk of that and doing what I just asked it to do. But you can see here, it's writing code. How much energy or how much effort? Like I like to say fuels or calories, like how many calories you have to burn to finish this task.
Hard to address it, I know.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just double checking to make sure for your question, so I answer it right, if you can actually enable it. So, so this is where if I want to, I can enable it to automatically charge my account whenever I go over my limit. That is massively disabled for obvious reasons. So I don't want it, especially if I'm doing a task that I don't realize it's that complicated. I don't want to all of a sudden have $100 or $89 dedicated from my account just to finish this one prompt. I'd rather stop, reevaluate what I'm doing, and try again in 20 minutes or try another model. However, some people, if you want to set your limit lower and you're always going to be a little bit over that, but your usage doesn't justify the next tier up, you may want to do that. I'm not running agents for a small business or anything like that, so I wouldn't have that set up to run. But again, these are, customizations that you put in here. Like I customize things in here. So I say, when I ask a question, I want an answer without superfluous information. When asked to create an output, generate the output without extra text. So it's easy to copy and paste. I hate when it gives me like, here is what you wanted. This is what I tried to do. And then it gives you a sample of what it is. I want to be able to just hit copy, and then I want to paste it where I need to go and then go on to the next task that I'm doing. So that's why I enter it in like that. So this is, I'm going to ask you how many tokens to answer your first question.
Question, and it then tells me what else it can do. Yes, generating tokens as well.
Yes, when you're asking, anytime you're prompting it, you're consuming some small amount of tokens. And just asking basic questions, not going to consume a lot. So now what it's doing is it's not telling you. It used to tell you what it does. And again, this is when these companies are deploying these models and they're blowing through large amounts of electricity and computing power just to test them and experiment with them. Remember, experimentation isn't the same thing as getting revenue or generating profit. It's just testing, otherwise known as playing with something. So now they've blocked it because they want people to go and upgrade to their largest tier. So again, this is something that just literally worked 2 weeks ago and today doesn't because a company with stockholders made X decision. Now, and granted, Anthropic's not a public company yet, but it gives you an example of how you can tweak these. Just like you can tweak a code base, you can tweak models to do the same thing. Now, let's go ahead. So this is the so I can publish this on the internet using this link. And then if I want to, I can embed it as a code on a page. But it basically generated this entire Taylor Swift page over here. Local events, community wall, all this. If I click join the club, it brings me to a form where actually I can go in and I can enter my information. I can literally, if I wanted to, publish this and run this as a regular website. Now, if I want to change it and I want to modify that, you're gonna need to be a software developer to understand how to do that. You can try to do it through a prompt, but you might end up breaking more than you to try to fix one tiny little thing. But again, if you're somebody who's looking to get 80% of the stuff done up front, you could, like I said, you can download this as an HTML page and literally just host this somewhere. I could give this to my friends at libraries and we could host a Taylor Swift website. It's done. Now, I'm going to go in and see what my usage looks like. Use another 6% in that one prompt. So you can see how, so I could go and I can make changes to this. Like I'll say add publicly available photos and album covers. Again, every single model is different. Like some models are triggered based on certain political officials' names. If you enter that political official's name at all in the prompt, it will not give you any response whatsoever. I'll let you try that out on your own to figure out which one that is. But essentially, every single one of these models is essentially a separate code base maintained by a separate company. And the versions that you're using this are different than the versions that they're giving to corporations. The versions of corporations may be more solid. They may be use less tokens, use less energy. They may be set up to overall be less and to run on someone's private cloud or their private software instead of running on like Amazon Web Services or Azure or something like that. You can actually license these models, get a copy, bring it in-house, and have it completely inside and make it a black box nobody else sees. But you got to have the infrastructure, you've got to have the talent, you've got to have the head count to be able to do all those things. But now with a lot of these third-party companies, being in other countries and you're starting to see export risks and things like that, we're going to see more of that stuff probably shift back into the US because a lot of people are going to want this more individual control. Now, to get back to some of the things that we were covering, so that's models. Agents are when an AI system can perceive its environment, make decisions, takes actions to achieve a goal. So agents, in a lot of words, a good way to build an agent. So I've built agents for people at work where, let's say they have a template that they need to upload into a system in order to create a record to pay someone. I created a assistant that all they have to do is upload the Excel that they used last time and a picture of the invoice, and it will fill out the Excel sheet and so that they can save a new copy. So rather than editing the Excel, going in, deleting out the existing row, putting in the new row, and then also keeping in the information from the previous that might not be available on the invoice, all that's done in one shot. I've also built document generators. So people have heard of things like non-disclosure agreements. Yes, you should not count on Claude or any AI to be a lawyer for you. But if you're looking for a starting point to build a template for something, you can have it build it. You can say, write a cease and desist note to a spam caller, and it will draft a cease and desist note for you. And you can simply write that. You don't need an agent for that. These are all things that are built in. It's just your creativity. And a lot of what people are selling right now is they're selling creativity because you don't know yet how you're going to use AI for your business or your personal life until you start playing with it and still you're using it. Now, these agents can be set up. Like a good example of an agent is if you pay for some of the premium versions of Google, you get access to what's called a voice agent. So a voice agent means it could be a phone number someone calls and it will literally interact with them as though it was a person. So those of you, I'm sure you've called a number and got an automated AI assistant. You can set that up as pretty much software as a service if you want, where you can go in and literally create a voice agent, tell it everything about your business, connect it to your web page, and it will try to answer questions for you and then redirect their call either to a voicemail, or if you want it to redirect to your cell phone, you can do that. If you're a small business and you don't have the ability to maintain like customer service staff, that probably would be very useful to you, even if it's going to cost you $50 a month. And the same thing, you could connect that same voice agent to a online form that actually can take the same information. And you could connect that to a chatbot. The way to look at agents is if you need an actual workflow, then you need an agent. But if you are simply accomplishing a task or trying to build an output or asking it a question and doing research, you don't need agents for that. You just need to give it the right context. Like, for example, I coach students a lot in how to use AI effectively. And what I say is don't use the AI to write your essay. Use the AI to make sure you have no spelling mistakes, you have a actual clear, concise argument, and have it make suggestions of things it would add or remove to strengthen the argument in your essay. I don't tell kids just write an essay and then copy and paste what the teacher said. Because what is acceptable is going to go up here in terms of student effort, because now you can generate an average basic output very quickly. It's a question is, how did you actually apply the information, which is what we would use the essay for previously in education, was to evaluate how somebody learned a topic. Now what you would do is, okay, I need you to do an essay, then I need you to create a 2-minute presentation, then I need you to rehearse it, and we're going to have people evaluate your enthusiasm and things like that, and your knowledge of the topic, and then you have to answer questions when you're done. AI can't fake that. Now, if you're willing to stay up and do 12 hours of prep, you can prepare for every question. You can write best essay you possibly can write. It's about how much time and effort you put into that. And the kids that I see that are using AI really, really effectively are using the former scenario that I'm talking about, where they're doing the first version themselves, or they're trying to get to an optimized state, not just enough. Because just enough, when everybody can go on LLM and do just enough, it means that bar is going to rise. So you're going to need to be more creative. You're going to need to think about how you approach problems. Whereas before, my generation just jump on a whiteboard, start doodling, and see what happens. Okay. Now you might need to spend 5 extra minutes to think about how you accomplish a problem. Like I told you with that VCF file, that was a simple thing that worked 2 weeks ago, doesn't work today. If I'd built an agent for that, the agent would no longer work. And I'd have to build something completely separate, and it would just basically be a waste of time. Now, with these, agents are good when you have what's called a loop. So essentially, take in some kind of data, like go to this website and grab the top 10 articles and summarize them for me. If you would rather the agent give you a 1-page summary of the top 10 articles from a website and send it to your inbox every day, build an agent for that. You could simply build one of those in Claude or in Gemini that does that. In that case, it's probably what's called more of an assistant than an agent. The words agents and assistant get thrown around a lot. Like in certain, like banking and finance, an assistant is actually like a smaller version of an agent, like a saved prompt, something you can reuse. Whereas an agent is actually something autonomous that runs on a schedule or is triggered by something, and you don't actually have to maintain it or click run. If you physically have to go in and run something, it's probably not an agent, it's probably just an assistant. And again, because the terminology people interchange all the time, it's important to understand it from your perspective. Use the words that work for you and allow you to communicate with your audience the most effectively. Like I said, a lot of what I build at work, I use the word assistants. But if I were to show what I built to somebody at DTI, they're going to say that's an agent. That's an agent, because from their point of view, they don't really differentiate between agents and assistants. It's either an agent or it's a chatbot. And that's pretty much it. So here's an example of, so Google has these things called gems. Okay. So I'll give you an example. So in my Google Gemini, I have so this is a gem that I created. So I created this one down here. So what this does is I can upload like a podcast link or an article or a subject. And I actually lost it. So I'm going to show you how to recreate that. As a science communicator, so the way I would create a gem is I would just go in here, new gem. Okay. That was stupid. So you see what it did? It just logged in and then completely deleted my chat and made me start again. Yeah. Tried that once. Well, the funny thing is what I just noticed. So here's a gem that I built. So I had this for a while and I downgraded from pro to the normal free version. And what I realized is they chopped off the last 300 characters of my prompt in here. A gem is another word for agent or assistant. It's just what Google calls them. So some have their own branding. So if you go into Claude, you'll see. So if I go in here and I'll create, Claude calls them projects. But again, it's kind of the same thing. So in Google, you have what's called an LM notebook. It's also similar to what a project is. So where I have different chats, like I'll give you an example. So here's an example of, there was a cybersecurity alert put out by DTI yesterday. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to create an infographic that I could share online so that people know when you're getting these random Microsoft Authenticator messages that someone's trying to hack you and not to actually go in and, enter in the code or authorize whatever it is, because someone's literally pinging your Microsoft account trying to break into it. So I had to create an infographic for it and I had to create here. Again, this isn't a gem, but this is an example of just how I create that. So for this, I can say, let's say I want to create. So you see how it's calling skills? So these are all like add-ins and packages. Remember how I told you the model is customized? So Claude allows you to download these things called skills, which are essentially just different knowledge packs or different, like, it's like adding other brains to it. So here, it built this. Now, I didn't tell it to create different outputs for TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn. Most people don't know this, but each one of those has a different maximum characters that you can put in a social media post. So that's why if you ever try to post something to Instagram and Facebook and it doesn't post to threads because it's over the maximum number of characters for threads. You can ask them what each one does, but what it did instead was it built an agent that does this. So for me, this is great on my desktop. Okay, no image, it does this. 2 caption variants are always generated and you pick the angle that lands better. So here's what I'll do. I'll just go in here and grab a podcast. So it looks like it's still building it, but it looks really great, right? But nothing on it works. So would I use this? Probably not. So I give it negative feedback. What I'm trying to point out is that you can build very quick and easy things with a lot of these tools, but to actually be able to operationalize them takes a lot of time and money. And what you'll find out is, and what people are finding out now is, you may think you can run an agent, but if that agent's going to cost you $150,000 a year to run because of all the tokens it uses and the subscription prices and everything else, is it really worth it? Or is it better just to have a human being do that and use the free version? This is when you, as a person or a professional, you have to pick and choose how to use your time. And, part of what we're trying to do these workshops in is so that people can tell us which things are valuable and which things aren't. Again, there's different types of agents. Like I said, you can create one that's rule-based, like I said, for a voice agent, tell it all about your company, tell them the kind of default frequently asked questions and build it that way. You can build it using a tool like I just did, where it's embedded in Claude, but I have to have my laptop available and open to be able to run it and use it. So it's not quite as utilitarian as it should be. And that's what you get in when you start getting past all of the hype. You realize that it's just a faster way to code, a faster way to build stuff, or a way for non-technical people to code. It doesn't mean you're going to build something perfect, usable, that's not going to change. Now, great, it's really good for selling things, but actually getting somebody to come in here, use this. Now, nobody in here is a web developer, I assume, right? Okay, so you're not going to go in there and edit the code when the thing doesn't work. So the value is limited on that. A lot of times you're only going to figure out what works for you when you go in and try it. And, we also, another way is having hackathons. So if you ever hear someone locally doing an AI hackathon and you have a business and you want it to solve a problem, go give that problem to the hackathon. A hackathon is not a security challenge. A hackathon is solve expensive problems in a very short period of time, usually 3 to 5 days. So you could literally, like, I'll give you an example. Last year at the University of Delaware hackathon, I had the kids download the entire open checkbook for 2025 and 2024, identify what average spending is, and then flag transactions that might be fraudulent. It found examples of fraud that was used in criminal investigations to prosecute superintendents who embezzled money from a school district downstate. The exact same documents and transactions. And it uncovered a data duplication issue where they accidentally copied the one division, all of their stuff got copied twice. And we found that, and the state of Delaware had no idea. That was 5 undergraduate students and 1 high school kid did that in 3 days. Good.
So this is a new technology, so like any new technology, it's expensive in the beginning and then it gets cheaper. Is it gonna be like that over time?
I think so. Because what we're reaching is the technology has advanced so far beyond what the average human uses it for. And while it's great for big tech, it doesn't generate revenue or profit. If it doesn't lead to revenue or profit, you can't justify the spending for this stuff long term. That's why you're seeing people like Anthropic. Like, I'll give you an example. So here's, so I'm going to go ahead and give you an example with Claude here. Okay. So this is the Claude add-in for PowerPoint. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save a version of this. So this is a model of Claude that's been designed to work as an add-in specifically in PowerPoint. So it doesn't do a lot of the other stuff that the other version does. So it won't like create a web page or do things like that. You'll have to go to the other thing to do that. But if you want to do something to a PowerPoint file, you can use this. So here's an example. As a specialist on Microsoft Office, redo this presentation. Now I have a separate deck that I created on this for the topic called for Microsoft Office. This is what I call asynchronous. So how many of you have ever had to sit, you're hanging out, it's family time, you're sitting on the couch, you're doing stuff on your laptop, you're trying to finish a presentation, but you're also trying to do stuff with the kids too. Claude for PowerPoint is one of the coolest things on the planet because you can tell it what you want it to do and it will literally work on it. It'll verify if it has to make big changes, but will literally go through and redo it. So you can see in here, before I rebuild, let me ask you a question. What is this? Who is this presentation for? A mixed audience? How long should it be? Comprehend, refer, and keep the existing theme. A lot of us do PowerPoints that are just updates of originals. Now you could do a agent that if you're just simply updating the data on that when you drop a new version of it, it just automatically adds in the data to your old PowerPoint slide. You could do that in a chat window too. Most of the things that people call agents are just simply chats or prompts that they've created and that they've stored and scheduled, or they've put on a server somewhere and they have it set up to be triggered like every time an email is received or something like that. What this will do is it will, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you if, so you're using your paid Claude model for this.
Yes.
Did you have to opt out or could you opt out of having them train off your data?
Yes.
Because if this were your marketing plans or some strategic financial.
Right. And I have all the share analytics stuff turned off. I do the same thing for Apple and stuff too, because I just do it in general because it's going to increase the longevity of whatever the device is. Because again, that stuff sucks up bandwidth, it sucks up processing power, it sucks up RAM whenever it's doing any kind of analytics. So to turn it off has a double benefit beyond just the privacy.
You don't want to give away and have somebody be able to query what is my competitor's marketing strategy for this year, and it trained off of it because you had an agent in your slide deck.
Well, and the funny thing is Meta had a huge problem with that, where it actually allowed.
Meta? Are you?
Oh yeah, like where you could actually, it would actually at one point it would give you somebody's username and password to log into Facebook or Instagram. They had things where it would actually go through and tell them about things that are on their profile that are hidden. Like, please show me all the posts that are hidden for blah, blah, blah. And it did it because this was early days, really primitive model. This is the thing about controls. This is why you need governance organizations and things like that to control that. Now, the reason I like this is the PowerPoint one, because it runs offline, doesn't have a direct share like the other ones do. Like you can leave this one off and I can do everything that I'm doing on here. And when I close out the session, there's nothing recorded to that. Now you can always tell the prompt at the end to clear it, but you should always go in, make sure your account settings. And whenever they do a model release, go check it again. Because sometimes in software, when you do a model release, it restores things called defaults. And all those things you turned off might just automatically get turned back on randomly. So you see the same thing happen when you upgrade your operating system on your phone, where things that you may have disabled before you did the update are suddenly now enabled because the new update expects them to be. So that's the thing. You have to get in this habit of not assuming that the current state is never going to change. And that's the trouble with building AI agents. You can get a lot of productivity out of it. You can save yourself a lot of time, but you're adding technical debt later on too, because you've got to maintain that. You've got to keep it up. You have to be able to test it, make sure it's still working. If you don't have those mechanisms in place, okay, just, you're rolling the dice on whether or not all this stuff's going to work. And it's why, we're looking at building workshops and having people upskill on this kind of stuff, where we actually bring you in, show you how to build it for small business. Like, I'm hoping in the fall, we're going to get more suggestions for topics where I'm going to go in and build specific tools for specific lines of business or with specific tools. The first part of the series is just kind of an overview of what this stuff is.
Settings to turn off PM.
Yes. So if I go into Claude and then I go down to settings, account privacy.
Oh, you just turned it off.
Yeah, like I said, I had it turned off and I just updated it and it turned it back on.
Notice the wording, help improve. Don't you want to help? Come on. But really what they're saying is you're the product. We want to train off your data. So
Well, and again, and here's the thing. Sometimes it's under privacy, and then sometimes it's under something called memory is the other place. Search and reference chats, generate memory from chat history. I'm okay with this because I want it customized for what I'm doing, and I don't use anything for work on my personal laptop. I use my only JP Morgan sanctioned LLM tool for anything I do at work. Because ours, like I said, it's private, it's in the private cloud, it's on our servers, no one else has access to it but us. So I can put highly confidential data into our LLM at work because it was designed for that. And it's been through 2 years of rigorous security testing to make sure engineers can't even see what you type prompts into. So we've made it a true black box for confidentiality reasons. You can build it like that, but you should always assume by default you're reporting and you're giving away data unless you go in and completely disable it, like I just said here. I want it to because a lot of times I'm doing a lot of things in career and technology education or AI, and then all the other various out of school things that I do. But again, turn them all off by default. But for me, I want this model to learn from me to a certain extent, where I don't have to keep giving it a sentence worth of context whenever I want it to do something. Like if it gives me for example, I'll ask it for an opinion on something. And let's say it gives me an opinion that's not science-based. I will say, remember that you should present me with science-based, credible options and solutions. If there is no literal credible resource for this, please do not suggest it as a possible source. And it'll remember that. I have it like I said, I put in there that I don't like it to have a whole bunch of superfluous detail. I want to be able to just generate what I want to generate, jump out and go. Same thing. And with these, like I said, Claude's probably one of the reason I like Claude is because it's one of the leaner ones too. Like, again, I've done a lot of stuff today and I've only blown through like 10 or 20% so far. Again, I'm not building web pages and things like that, but even doing analysis. Like I'll give you an example of I just realized we're actually at time. So you guys want me to keep going or I'll go for another 5 minutes just to show this.
So I'm going to jump in and say there's quite a few questions in chat and discussions in chat.
Never mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out this deck. Again, there's a ton of different agent prompts in here. So within this, the deck that's going to go out, again, assistants typically are tools and agents typically are workflows. That's kind of the difference in a corporate level, how we determine it. And that's how kind of big tech differentiates the two. But then again, when I use the word voice assistant, I'm completely deviating from that. The point is that they can, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good call. Thank you.
If there's time, could you explain what is the Delaware AI Commission?
So the Delaware AI Commission was created, I think, in 2024, 2023, to be created as a body to provide AI policy recommendations to the General Assembly and to recommend framework. So most recently, we've been working on an AI incorporation bill because obviously There's a lot of money to be made if you can automate incorporation even further than Delaware already has. And being how many corporate entities are in this state, we stand to make a lot of money if we can make that easier. One of the things that we ended up talking about that came through that is many of you remember there was a Fenwick Island decision by a court shortly a little bit ago that said corporations could vote in city elections if they own property. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want an AI corporation to be able to vote when people who have, been charged with felonies and stuff can't vote. I think they should get the vote first before a robot does. Just my point. We're going to be adding 10 words to the bill that says an AI incorporated in Delaware cannot vote in any federal, state, or municipal elections, period.
So are you saying an AI could incorporate?
Yes, there's Utah was probably the first one to do it where they allowed decentralized corporations using blockchain technology, but they're going to allow actual AI incorporations. Now, the rule that we've set is it has to have at least one human agent. We have to have at least a single human being who is culpable for this. And then there's other things like around, becoming an actual business and what the requirements are similar to any other business. They're just going to be a little bit more robust. Now they're going to do a sandbox for this, assuming the bill gets passed, where they're going to do a small amount of companies and they're not allowing any financial agent stuff. So we're not going to allow it to collect money or anything like that, but to be able to actually go in, submit a form, do incorporation. There's a couple of use cases that are doing for that. We have to try something because worst thing happens is another state defines what the lowest bar possible is, and then trying to get anything beyond that will be impossible. Versus if we're the first ones to pass a law, we set a precedent for the entire country in a positive way, like saying AI and corporations can't vote. Again, you'd think it's a no-brainer, but in certain situations, you can see where certain people can argue one way or another. So let's just make it clear. If there's any gray area, now I just found out that they filed a separate bill to overturn that Fenway decision where corporations aren't going to be able to vote just because they have property. But it's a very old charter statute that apparently is in several towns in Delaware. So that was a big topic. But again, if we didn't have an AI commission, you would have expected that to get discussed in June in the Delaware General Assembly in Dover when they're done, June 30th. No, we have to be able to have these conversations with policymakers as well as people from the industry to talk about how to do it the right way. Because again, if you ask the technology companies, they will give you exactly what they want, but what they want might not be what's best for every citizen in Delaware. And that's why, the AI Commission exists. Okay, so Councilman Tackett says, I was trying to create a flower in Claude Free last night. And after the third way, I got 3/4 of the way to and told me it was done for 24 hours. Yeah, unfortunately. Try it in Gemini after it doesn't work in Claude and see if it does that. Again, the pro is probably you're going to be able to create most things without running out of tokens. But again, just bounce it from one model to another until your limit resets. Or if you have multiple Gmail addresses, log in under different free accounts and use multiple versions of the same thing. I've also done that as well. So in my classes, I explain to students they can use AI to ask a question if it would ask me if it were in the classroom for grammar, for ideas. That's great. The one thing that AI does offer students is a safe place to ask what they might term as stupid questions or awkward questions, things that they're not quite confident to ask in front of everybody else. There are good things for that. And when you want to learn a lot about a topic, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten stuck in my phone deep diving on a topic in a conversation because it will go out. I can say compare laws in Delaware, California, New York, New Jersey. It will go to their Legiscan websites and grab the code and compare it. Now, I might need to do deep research or something like that, but I can learn a lot more and I can do it in a much more efficient way where I can cover larger ground, get more detailed information, and then refine it faster than it would be if I went just simply Google. Now, that doesn't mean that I say Google a lot, but again, you can use, DuckDuckGo is a good alternative, especially if you want it to be private and secure. For me, I have everything integrated into my Gmail and I've got 20 years of Gmail. So at this point, they've got enough data on me and I don't have anything to hide. So that's kind of how I approach it. But again, do what's right for you in terms of how these different statements are. And keep trying them, because I'll tell you this right now, for image generation, Gemini is much better than Claude is. You want to create like a good example of, let's say you're doing a flyer for your local food truck night. Okay. And the only thing different on that little logo every single week is the truck's logo. Upload the picture, upload a copy of their logo, say, switch out the logo with this. Gemini will do that. And it will produce a near identical copy with just the logo changed. Again, that's something that you previously would have had to update Canva or go into PowerPoint or go into image editing or Paint or something and do it that way. So just try it, see what it does. The more you learn about it, and again, what will typically happen is the more people try to do something and Claude doesn't do it, and then if people don't convert to pay customers, eventually they're probably going to make it available for free because they want people to use the model. Because now they've got, most of these companies have gone through all the data that's publicly available, and they need contracts with institutions to perfect these models for medicine, legal, science, all those things like that. So that's, I like the points that we talked about privacy. Constantly be vigilant about that. If you don't believe me, for those of you who have an iPhone, turn off Apple Intelligence and see how longer your battery stays on and how much faster your phone is overall when you have all of it turned off, because it all uses bandwidth, it all uses calories, it all uses energy, and things like that. So we will send out, just making sure, I think I covered that. We will send out the version of the deck. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of information in here. I have additional system prompts. So things like defining the persona. So like, let's say, for example, you're a small business owner. You can create a 3-sentence statement, what your business is, what your name is, what you do, what the image is, and save that in the memory of the AI. So whenever you have anything created for business, it can reference that the same way your short-term memory does or your long-term memory does. When you tell somebody to remember something, it can do that. But that persona is something you could reuse. Because I don't know about you, but I play a bunch of different hats too. So in some, I'm a science communicator focused on CTE education. In others, I'm a logical pessimist about AI, focused on AI governance and guardrails. Depending on what I want to do, I might want it to look from that point of view. Like a good thing that I'll give you an example of. So in going through here, one of the reasons I do the way I use it for PowerPoint is once I'm done a PowerPoint version, I will go through it multiple times and I will say, as a motivational speaker with 15 years experience in banking and finance, review the following and identify any terms that are not explicitly defined in the document and add text to explain what they are. It'll do that. And then I'll ask it again. Okay, as a middle school student with no knowledge of AI, evaluate this presentation and tell me how difficult it is to understand or if there are certain things that need to be explained more. I will put 7, 8, 9, 10 iterations of that when I'm done a draft instead of just asking it to write perfect version the first time. It's about, and a lot of this is approaching problems non-linearly. You can try 5 or 6 different methods in a real short period of time with AI. And agents allow you to do those things that you're doing 5, 6, 10 times a week. You can automate that and you can have personal control over that. And again, if you have questions about specific use cases for your business, I'm happy to help for that. There's going to be, we will have information on the UD hackathon. I just need to confirm whether it's going to be the second week of July or the second week of August. But as soon as signups are available, I'll have that available as well, because it's going to focus on state and county use cases. So all the different departments are putting forward use cases for that as well. Thank you all for your time and have a great week. Sorry, I got a little carried away.